right. Hi, I am Lior Zaltzman. I'm the Deputy Managing Editor of Kveller, and today we will be talking with Erica Lipez, the showrunner of We Were the Lucky Ones. I am so thrilled for this conversation. Feel free to turn on your cameras, and the chat is there for you for any of your questions. First of all, I just wanted to, there's Erica. There she is. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the timing of this conversation. We are, depending on where you are, at the tail end of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day celebrated in Israel, that, we celebrate in Israel, kind of in relation to, the date is in relation to Israeli Independence Day, Israeli Memorial Day, a week before. And I grew up in Israel, and Yom HaShoah for me was a day of where I often participated in Yom HaShoah ceremonies. So you sing songs and you read poems that were written about and in connection to the Holocaust. And those were the first moments where, for me, I kind of realized the power of art to connect us with these historical moments, because more than even visiting, Poland when I was in high school, these were the moments where I could really connect with these stories. And I feel like We Were the Lucky Ones is such an amazing example of art that really connects us emotionally, cerebrally, in every way with this moment of history. So I just wanted to thank Erica for being with us. And yes, this event is being recorded. Let me introduce Erica first. And maybe if you have, or any relatives or anyone who has died in the Holocaust, or anyone that you're connected to, maybe we could take also a moment to share those in the chat so we can kind of like honor this day of memory, and then kind of get into our conversations. I'm happy to read any names that you want to share. So I'll introduce Erica first. Erica is the showrunner and executive producer of We Were the Lucky Ones for Hulu. Previously, she was an executive producer on one of my other favorite shows, Julia on HBO Max, and The Morning Show for Apple. And she's written for shows like The Bates Hotel and Suits, and she's also a playwright. Her play The Tutors was produced at Second Stage Uptown, an extended run directed by Thomas Kail, who also directed the first and last episode of We Were the Lucky Ones. Thank you for joining us, Erica.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. And thank you everyone who came to participate in this. I think the support and love for the show has been felt by everyone who worked on it. So we're so appreciative of everyone who watched, and it's really special to be with you all on this day in particular. So thank you for that introduction, Lior, and for the day and for sharing names in the chat. It's really wonderful.
That's so touching. Thank you, everyone. All right, I just wanted to kind of throw that back at you. Like, so has We Were the Lucky Ones changed the way you connected working on this show, changed the way you connected with the story of the Holocaust in this chapter of history?
Absolutely. I mean, I really resonate with what you said, Lior, as a child learning about the Holocaust. I was educated by my family and in Hebrew school, but I feel like the way I really deeply found myself connecting to it time and again was through books and movies and personal accounts that really sort of made me connect through a storytelling perspective. I think that is always such an effective way to sort of, we talked about when making the show, sort of trying to collapse time in some way to not make it feel so distant, as I think sometimes we like to do with history, is, sort of say it's safely placed in history. And so when I read Georgia Hunter's incredible book, I think I was both struck by how it felt like a very different perspective on the Holocaust that I hadn't seen before. I think I felt like somebody who had a pretty good education on that chapter in history, and there were stories within her family that I had never seen before. I think it so deeply represented the Jewish diaspora and the way her family was scattered and ended up around the world. And I felt deeply compelled to try to bring that story to life. And I feel so altered by the experience of getting to work on this project. It's really been about 5 years that we've been working on it. And yeah, I've talked about this with some other people. I think confronting what they went through in this chapter of history in such an intimate way and such a human way, in some ways has, I think, made me a much sadder person, but also a much more hopeful person. I mean, I think it's just made me grateful for the life I have and for the opportunity to remember both the the survivors, like the Kurtz family, and those who didn't survive. I mean, it was a real privilege to get to show that story and to and also to hear the way that other people have connected to it and seen their own family stories represented by the Kurtzes.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing people in the chat also saying that they had family in Radom and in Poland. So people are like very intimately, I think, connected.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of people during Yom HaShoah kind of post about the show and post about how it was the thing that helped them this Yom HaShoah kind of connect and feel honor that history. So I think that's so touching. Thank you everyone for sharing your stories and people from Lodge too, which Lodge is in the last
Oh, I'm
episode
seeing
where
that.
they get
Wow.
out. So thank you. I really appreciate that. I would really encourage everyone who can to look up at the chat and see everyone's names. And also, please feel free to share your questions about the finale and the show in the chat field. So have you rewatched the show? Kind of like when was the last time you watched? I watched the finale 3 times, I think, at this point, and I cry every night. So,
Yeah, I may have you beat for a number of times I've watched it. It is part of the process of making a television series is you watch. I mean, it's like sort of crafting a script in the editing process. You're crafting the piece again. And so that involves watching every episode probably hundreds of times. And so it has been a really, I mean, and when you talk about really getting intimately familiar with material, I feel that way with this show, of course. And but I think it's so interesting. We really only finished sort of the final finishing small touches on the finale about, I think, 4 weeks ago, and then it's out in the world. So it's been a pretty remarkable experience to sort of be working on it so intensely up until right before it was airing and while it was airing, and now it's sort of out to everyone, and to sort of already be getting the feedback from people who have experienced it is a really exciting thing. I know, and I have to tell you also, all the cast says hello, and and everybody else, they're very excited whenever people watch the show.
they're so wonderful, each and every one of them. Um,
Oh,
does it
sorry, I'm
do?
like, this is the multitasking part where it's like I'm
I
now
know where we're looking at.
frustrated by the
So for
chat.
anyone who hasn't watched the show, we were the lucky ones.
Yes, please
Just
watch
in
it.
case you're here, A, please watch it. But B, the show tells the story of one family. It is based on author Georgia Hunter's actual family, her grandfather's story and his family, the Kurc family that's all survived, basically all that came from Radom in Poland, where a lot of your families here have come from. And all managed to survive the Holocaust in various ways, various places. Some of them, I feel like, are stories that we've not seen before, people who survived by in the gulags or survived, by fighting in the Polish army or survived in a way where they hid their identities. I feel like all these stories of survival are not the kind of common Holocaust narratives that we see on screen, which I thought was so touching because that's also how my family survived. My family made it to Uzbekistan. They're from Warsaw and Drohobych, which is now in Ukraine. And so it was really touching. And I see a lot of messages here saying how touching it was to see their family stories or stories that are very resonant to them on the screen.
Yeah.
There's a big challenge, like we were the lucky ones, I would say, how it's going to end from maybe the title screen. And so what are some of the biggest challenges of shooting a finale for a show like that?
Ooh, I mean, we actually, so we had 7 out of 8 scripts written when we started filming, and I knew I would have to write the finale while we were filming, which I think already felt like a daunting task, but then sort of getting to being on set, filming, seeing the incredible work that the cast was doing and all of our designers were doing, and how deeply invested everyone was in bringing this family story to life. I was like, I already felt so much pressure, and then I was like, oh gosh, I really, really have to make sure this finale works. And and so I think what I thought all the way through was, everyone's story just needs the time and space to finish in some way. I mean, I think in a lot of times in finales, you're sort of asked to streamline, and I think with a big ensemble, it just felt like I felt like if people invested that much in this family, they want to see how everyone's story, I almost hate the word concludes, because what I think is so beautiful about the end of their story is it sort of feels like a beginning.
Yeah.
And then I think also the other piece that I knew was really important is that, like you said in the title, you sort of have a sense that it might have, I guess, what you might call a happy ending, but that it couldn't be that way, that that was far too simple an interpretation of what happened to this family and all the meanings behind we were the lucky ones, because to survive an event like that is, I mean, I guess you could call it lucky, but you know what they went through, nobody could call that lucky. I, and so it felt really important that we found a balance in the finale between the pain and the joy and the honoring of those who did not make it, and but also honoring the future that they would have given their survival and the chance to sort of live on for many people. And so that was the balancing act. And I will say it's probably the slowest I've ever written a script in my life.
But you did it. You held all the pieces. You stayed fully balanced there. I guess there's a couple more details that I need to fill people, because I feel like there's more people than I expected who haven't seen the show yet. So first of all, the show is first of all, you are lucky because you're in for a treat. And the second thing is that it's streaming on Hulu. All 8 episodes are now out.
I will say, if you are not in the United States, though, I think it's on Disney Plus elsewhere. So if you are anywhere international, you can find it on Disney Plus, I believe.
And including in Israel, you were
Yes. In Israel, Disney
my
Plus.
family
Yeah.
is very invested.
Yes. Yes. I wonder, I mean, I think that might also be, we aired in the US first, and now we're just starting to go into other countries. So I think it's going to be a rollout over the next couple months. If anyone is waiting, it will come, I promise.
All right. Yeah, someone's saying in Canada they're a few episodes behind. You're in for a treat. Okay, I will try
Oh
not.
no, I'm spoiling.
I will try to juggle the spoiling aspects of this conversation. Um, thank you all so much. There's so many kind words about the show in the comments. It's like almost impossible to go through them all, and I'm really
And
grateful.
I did see one like a little while back that I wanted to speak to, because it was really meaningful for me. And I have heard from people who are Jewish who felt this way too, that I think we did make a point to cast all Jewish actors in our family and in the spouses of the family. And it was I really I mean, it was very important to me that we did that, but I think I didn't quite realize when we got to set and we were sort of realizing these rituals and these holidays like Passover and Rosh Hashanah. And it was so moving to see a group of diverse Jewish actors because, you know, everyone was coming to it with their own experience of their
Yeah.
Jewishness. And it made those scenes so lively and so fun to film because everyone, I mean, we both had our sort of historical Jewish consultant who was making sure we were doing the traditions right for the time period. And then everyone was coming with their own background and what they thought would be on the table. And there was lots of arguing back and forth. And it felt very much like the experience of being around a table on one of those holidays. And I've been very excited to see people feeling like those scenes feel like their family around a dinner table. That's really what we wanted to do. And I think it did. It really helped the piece a lot to make sure it was a Jewish ensemble. And I'm really proud of that for
Yeah,
this
it
one.
felt so real. And like you're saying, people with different Lior Ashkenazi is Sephardi, and he grew up with Ladino as his first language. And so
Yes.
like he
And
was kind
I
of
mean, that was a really, because he had to then lead the Seder, and he was learning the prayer, and he had to learn different prayers and tunes and things that he was used to. I mean, it was like he thought
yeah.
it was a very interesting.
He said he kind of fell in love with Yiddish. So Lior Ashkenazi plays Sol, who is the family patriarch. This show has such an amazing cast. Really, like as an Israeli avid TV fan, I'm sure some of you know, like Michael Aloni from Shtisel, Lior Ashkenazi, one of the biggest. Israeli stars of TV and film, Hadass Yaron, who was also in Shtisel. Uh,
We reunited them. They were love interests, right? And we love
we
interests again.
reunited them and separated them
I
again
know.
and
I'm
reunited
sorry.
them. But they reunited. It's so beautiful. I love, someone was saying, it's kind of ironic that their favorite scenes are the humorous ones, but the humor is so powerful. And it's so, I like, there's a scene where Mila, who is Adas Yaron, she is like one of the older siblings, and she says, oh, she was looking at like she's pretending not to be a Jew, and she's going in to visit Halina and Adam, and she's saying their landlord was looking at her like she had challah rolls for her arm. And I just like laughed. I couldn't help laughing. There's like a
I have to tell you, the writer of that episode, I'm so excited today. The writer of that episode is this brilliant writer named Ebony Booth, and she wrote that line that made me laugh so hard. And Ebony today won a Pulitzer Prize for her playwriting. So everyone should go out and check out the work of Ebony Booth. But when I tell you we had the most
right.
amazing group of writers on this show, and what I was looking for in the writers in the show, and I'm so glad is deeply human writers. You know, I think everyone in our writers room share that desire to, you know, sort of let this family be people. And that meant that they, despite their circumstances, they have a sense of humor when they can, that they like still, you know, they still annoy each other sometimes, that they have little fights and big fights. And yeah, the humor was, I think, really any moment we could find it. I mean, it wasn't even hard to find. It just felt honest. And I mean, I have now had the pleasure of, I mean, Georgia Hunter was in the writer's room, and so she was with us every step of the way. But I've now gotten to meet many of the Kurc's descendants, and they are a big, gregarious, very funny, very irreverent family. And I'm really happy that we were able to make space for those moments in the show, because I feel like as much as the show is trying to realize some of these really harrowing moments that they experience and make sure we get that piece of the history right, I think it's so much more about the moments in between of the family just connecting with each other and finding a way to laugh in moments, and sort of the music that they make, and falling in love and having kids and all of
Yeah,
that
there's
stuff.
so
Like,
much love. Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean,
every type of love,
yeah,
parental
these are
love,
their
estranged.
lives. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought about that all the time, that you know, it's not fair that this chapter, like that this happened in their lives, and that like 8 years of their lives were consumed by this horror, but they still advanced their lives in spite of that. And I was so moved by that from this family, and also by so many other accounts I read, both of survivors and also stories about people who didn't survive. I mean, there's so many stories like this. And I'm so glad we got to tell just one of them in this family.
I thought a few comments here are saying, like the show really, Holocaust movies sometimes feel kind of, I don't want to talk about anything, but like, like trauma porn. One person says, like, let's
Yeah.
just take a little bit of like this Jewish trauma. And this was a show that was really, in that way, it was like a Jewish story of that was very, very honoring these people and their stories. And like, oh, and the funny moments also, like Adam pretending he had a foreskin, somebody mentioned that's a real moment that
It's a
happened
real
from the Kurt's family,
I
right?
have had so many questions from people like, you made that up, right? And I was like, I did not make that up. It's like that is I've had the pleasure of meeting Adam and Helena's son Ricardo, and that is his favorite story to tell that his father passed down to him. I mean, it's a remarkable story,
He
and
was a master forger in every way.
in every way, in every way. It is pretty amazing. And I have to give Sam Wolf, the actor, a shout out for his brilliant commitment to the moment.
It's hard. I want to pay tribute to every single actor in this show because this is really like an ensemble cast in the sense that like everyone gets their moment to
They
shine.
really do.
Everyone is amazing in the show. Someone was asked a question about how do you feel like you juggled this the idea or the concept of faith, Jewish faith in the show in that time.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I mean, it was in some ways it was Georgia's book was the guide of that in some ways, because I think she did such a beautiful job of sort of showing the different relationships to faith within that one family. I mean, I think Sol was clearly a very religious Jew, and I think some of his children were, I guess you might say they were more secular, but really, very culturally connected. And then, but I think also I did see, just sort of within it was just of interest to me too, and I think the other writers too, as we were exploring, of thinking about what an experience like this does to your faith, and also what faith means and how it can mean so many different things. It can mean religion, it can mean God, it can mean family, it can mean a partner, it can mean a child, it can mean a stranger who helps you. And I mean, I think getting to see how that works for so many of the different characters in different ways. I mean, I think we really, I was definitely particularly interested in that with the character of Gennett Kurtz, the eldest son, who is a legal mind, and I think sort of has I'm embarrassed talking about this right now because I think my parents are on this Zoom, and they both come from the legal profession. But I think he sort
No
of
offense to the legal profession. Great
I love
respect to the legal
lawyers, mom and dad.
profession.
But I think it's like I think given my family and I love you, mom and dad, I felt like I really understood how his mind worked and the order of it and sort of what happens when that world order breaks down in some ways. I was really interested in how that might happen for him, particularly. And I think as we researched more about the Siberian camps and the gulags, and realized just how like there were like very odd rules and laws within those camps that then they didn't follow and sort of used to torment people. And it was and thinking about a brain like Gennick's in that environment and how it might erode his faith. And then what I did know about him, I see someone said, did Gennick actually go through the shift in faith? I'm not, I don't know exactly, but I do know he had to pretend to be Catholic. That was a choice he made, particularly as he got out of the gulags and had to get into the military. I mean, we did find that was a really interesting chapter a piece of history to research, because there were a lot of different accounts about whether people were allowed to be Jewish in Anders' army or not. And what was very clear was that there were like in so many chapters in that history, there were quotas. There were quotas of how many Jews were allowed in certain circumstances. And it is very clear at a certain point he made a choice to pretend to be Catholic. And, you know, that was in his own account. And just my mom is posting. Sorry. Hi,
Hi,
mom.
Erica.
Supportive parents. Very nice. And so it was, you know, I think that it felt like we could really dig into the question of faith sort of like full on through Genic of what it would do to somebody to have to pretend to be another religion. And, you know, I think we thought, well, I don't want to get too much into spoilers if some
I
people
know.
you know, but it's a big part of his storyline and his wife Herta. I saw someone did her line "Faith is a choice," and I think that Moran Rosenblatt is, I mean,
Yeah.
could shout out every actor. She's
And
brilliant.
she just had a baby and I like talked to her and she was like connecting to Herda in all kinds of different
I
ways, which is
know.
amazing. But she's so good. Watch her in everything you can watch her. I mean,
I
I'll say this to everyone in the cast. Watch them in everything you can watch. Because
I could not agree more. If I could write for this group of actors for the rest of my life, I would. It's I keep telling them I just want to like sort of start an ensemble and just write new pieces for them. They're so amazing.
Herda had like amazing, really powerful lines. Everyone had really powerful lines, but like in their own way. But she was like
Well,
had
and
these pearls of wisdom.
I have to say, I think part of what made this whole project work because it was such a big undertaking was the responsibility everyone took for their piece of it. Because I mean, making a TV show is definitely a collaboration, and those actors, you know, they all after the family gets separate in the beginning, they're all on these journeys in pairs in some ways, and the time that those kind of little teams within the family took to sort of nurture both those working relationships off screen and on screen. And I mean, just the chemistry between everyone, like you see that with Henry and Moran who play Genic and Herta, and Joey and Sam who play Helena and Adam, and Nahuma and Saul, Robin and Lior. It's like, I mean, I could, yeah, Amit and Eva who play Jakob and Bella. I'm like, it just blows my mind all the time, the sort of care that they all took every night. You know, they'd finish their day's work and then they'd go and spend time working on the material the next day together. And that's not always that typical when you're making a show. That felt very unique to this project. And I think it's part of what made it work.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're all so good. First of all, housekeeping from the lovely Sabrina at Hulu said hi from Team Hulu. The series is streaming internationally on Disney Plus in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the Philippines, Singapore, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. More with episodes weekly and more countries to be announced soon. So anyone who was not on the list, just wait. Someone mentioned there's a really, I don't want to spoil it, but there's the scene that really like destroyed me was Robin. I talked to her about this scene. Actually, you can on the Kveller website, there's some reflections from the cast on the finale, but the scene where, and I think it's a scene that a lot of children of survivors know of coming back to Rodham, of coming back to the home, and we see really like Nechuma, who has been really holding it together for a
Yeah.
very long time for Soul, for her family, kind of have this torrential like breakdown coming back to her house. What was that like? Shooting that scene, it's so I'm getting
Honestly,
goosebumps.
it
Like,
makes
thank
me
you.
cry. It makes me cry thinking about, I think both what Robin did, but also, I think it's like, you know, again, when you talk about, knowing things sort of intellectually and from a historical perspective, like I knew it was not easy for, you know, for those who survived the Holocaust to sort of find a safe place to land. You know, I sort of knew that conceptually, but really digging into the history of that and sort of seeing that not only you get to this moment where you've survived this event, but then I mean, there's so many people just still weren't safe. And we were sort of really digging into the history around Rodham specifically. And it was just devastating to see that, to sort of see the real notice that we put in the series of that saying that Jews need to get out beyond the borders of Rodham by a specific date or else they won't be safe. And that continued anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
and to fight and survive that long, and then have to then do the work of realizing you can't go home when probably that is something that you've held in your mind that whole time. I think that was on my mind when writing that. And then, but then I mean, Robbins talked about this, and it really did feel like this when she filmed it. It just felt like something erupted out of her. I mean,
Yeah.
and she sort of said she feels like she had sort of a more like spiritual moment
Yeah.
there. So there was just a rage inside of her that she had never really thought about. I realized was there before, I think.
Yeah.
And it uh it is, I mean, it is heartbreaking that, I mean, I think I'm so proud of that we were able to find space for those moments in the finale. But I mean, you could write a whole series about that period of time when people
Yeah.
were trying to find a safe
Yeah.
place to land, a country to take them in after this horrific event.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, and we talked, and that was a really important piece of the finale too. And this is from Georgia's book too. She really thought about that. It's like when those announcements that the war is over, we are so used to seeing the celebrations, but that it would not necessarily feel that way for
It
those who
didn't. No.
still didn't have somewhere safe to land and didn't know where their family was.
Yeah.
So that was important to us.
There was a big, yeah. I mean, I remember this story from my great aunt going back home and home and realizing that it's not a home and running in these streets they used to be. You have these visceral memories of your childhood and all these things, and suddenly it's just not that anymore. Somebody mentioned, I don't know if it's in a message to me, but the fact that the title feels uncomfortable. And actually, in the piece that I linked in the comments I added a reflection from you, actually, Erica, about the title, because in our interview, actually shared something really beautiful about the idea of luck and being lucky. And I think it's a bittersweet concept, I think, for anyone who knows survivors or who tells these kind of stories.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, I think it's an incredible title that Georgia found for her book, because I think it does many things. One, it honors someone in the family who said that. It's, the title comes from a family reunion, which was the family reunion that really started Georgia on this journey to, she was at this reunion with, at that time there were a lot of, it was a lot of the children of the family, the main family who survived. And they were telling these stories, and everyone had a piece of it. As she thought, like, somebody really needs to write this down. And that's kind of what started our journey. But Felicia was there, and she looked around the table and she said, we were the lucky ones. And so I think Georgia both felt like it was a beautiful way to honor Felicia in particular. And then also, it's true to what they felt. Like, they felt very, very lucky. She talked about that all the time, the family still does, that they would say that all the time, that they felt very lucky to be alive. But that, Georgia, just in her observance, like in her ability to sort of observe the complexity of that. And, she said nobody really talked a lot about their sadness or the pain, but, she saw it. She saw sort of the ways in which they would gloss over some of the moments. She thought about it in the way in which her grandfather Adi didn't tell her any of this himself, that she learned about this after he passed. And I think there is clearly such a cost to that survival, and the weight
Yeah.
of what you have to carry, and the memories that you have to carry, and the memories of those who didn't survive, that I think the irony in the title was never lost on me while working on it.
Yeah, and we really feel it and small, like in a very small human ways at like Herta says some things and suddenly they realize that the years, the literal years that were taken from their lives and that will forever change them. Someone mentioned also the Tattoos of Auschwitz, which is now streaming on Peacock and does actually really very much show they decided instead of setting it just in Auschwitz to set it also in like modern days as the story was being told and really show the price of what surviving is, what luck is, and all these things, which I think is a really powerful thing to show because you survive. But a lot of people, it's very weighty. It's a very heavy kind
It
of
is very
survival.
heavy.
Um, Someone asked
Jesus.
if there are any. Michael Aloni shared sang a lullaby that his mother actually sang. It's a made up kind of lullaby in Polish.
Yeah,
And
there
it's
was
beautiful.
I
Um,
don't know if he talked about the process of well, I think one of the things that was so wonderful about this experience and this is so much about Georgia's generosity as a person is how much she wanted people to bring pieces of themselves and their own history and their own connection to this material to the project. And so anytime we had a chance to do something like that, we would. And Michael mentioned that he had this lullaby that his mom used to sing to him that he wanted to sing to baby Felicia in the first episode. And we were so excited about it. And then there was this hilarious moment. So whenever you have a song in a TV show, you have to clear the rights to it.
right.
It was this very
Then you realized.
that's very funny experience of him trying to figure out with his mom if it was if she had made it up or if it was a real lullaby or thankfully we were able to clear it and it's in the series and a wonderful tribute to
It's
them.
beautiful.
So
Are there any other kind of like little moments like that that people brought their own story that you can share?
yeah, I mean, and some of them were in physical objects. You know, I know Robin wore a necklace from her family in one scene. We recreated a lot of props from Georgia's family, and then sometimes she'd bring the real piece, and people could use them for a scene. You know, we had some of these are from the writers' room. We had this incredible researcher Daniel Dabach, who is I mean, I'm so grateful to him. He's the one who he took Georgia's research drive and then sort of expanded on it. He ended up making a 300-page document of research that was the basis for how we worked on this series. And I think the reason it is, you know, as historically accurate as it is. And Daniel has his own connection to this period of history and you know, a story that the character of Isaac tells to Mila about what happened to his father is very inspired by a story that happened to Daniel's family. And I mean, there were pieces like that. I mean, there are some
That is a very powerful
it's a
scene.
very powerful, yeah, and it's really, I mean, a lot, so some sad moments, and you know, I think there were some other small pieces I would try to get in sometimes. You know, Logan's grandfather, he shared with us that he ended up in Shanghai, and you know, there's
There's a
this
little
finale where you know Caroline's talking about maybe we should look in different
maybe
places like
Shanghai.
Shanghai, and you know, I just try to find little things like that, and I know the actors would do things like that too, to just try to connect themselves to the material. I mean, Logan actually talked a lot about trying to find even mannerisms that he was sort of pulling from his own family to sort of
Yeah.
you know, both connect to who Adi was, but also his own family's experience. And anytime we could do that, that was a really exciting thing. And actually, I will say the Kurtzes, when I met them, they asked, I remember it was so moving. They said to me, please make this story about more than just our family. And I thought that was both so moving and also I think what I hope they see in the story of being so specific about their family and their family's experience. I think actually more people are connecting to it. I
Yeah.
think that specificity is what people see reflected in their own families.
I mean, so many comments here really do say that it's like hard to go through everything. But you guys keep sharing your questions. I know Lior shared with me that there's a Rosh Hashanah scene, and he did the whole like kind of Rosh Hashanah sitter, like he brought the apples and the honey and the because he really wanted it to be like to feel like kind of anchored, I guess, in this scene in this holiday, which I thought was really beautiful. And again, Lior is not Ashkenazi, so he brings the
Yeah, I
different.
know the great.
Even though his last
You
name is
his name.
Ashkenazi.
I know, I
Most
know.
names with that, most people with that last name are not.
I see one, I could see a question here, how I got connected and began to work on this project. I love answering that question. It's um Lior, as Lior mentioned earlier in my credits, I worked with the director Tommy Kail 10 years ago on a play, and we both started working in television in that time since then, and we really wanted to find something to do together. And Tommy has known Georgia for a long time and watched as she researched this book and wrote it. And then it came out and was this bestseller. And I think he thought, I don't want anyone to try making this but me. And then I think he knew how deeply I would connect to it. So he sent me the book and I read it. I read it in about 24 hours. Like I just like couldn't put it down. My heart was in my throat. I was so overwhelmed, so moved. I vividly remember just sitting there and thinking, oh no, like this is too hard, this is too big, this is like this will be, no one will make it. And yet I just have never seen a story like this, and it deserves to be made. And so I have to try. And I didn't want anyone else to try except me. And I
Mine.
knew I was like, I just was like, yes, I'm in. And I the added bonus, Tommy is such a dear collaborator, and he's such a wonderful director and producer and just creative mind and spirit and friend. And he's also he describes himself as a bit of a yenta. Like he does know how to bring people together and match people. And I think he thought Georgia and I would really get along, because I mean, you can't do a story like this, I mean, unless you really want to be responsible to the material and do a faithful adaptation. And I just fell totally in love with Georgia. I mean, she feels like a sister for life. She's just she's an incredible human being, and she really was like like we were sort of next to each other every step of making this project.
So beautiful. And she is in the finale, right? Like in the
She is. I look for her. So she is in the finale. She and her husband Robert and her two sons Wyatt and Ransom, they're in a scene. There's a scene where Adi gets a telegram with the fate of his family, and he is racing to the Polish consulate. And as he's running through the street, he sort of bumps into a family. And so for just a second, you see Georgia bumped by her grandfather on screen, and it's a wonderful collapse of time, history,
I
everything.
know the space and
But
time
and
continuum
yes,
broke.
someone said also spotted her mom Isabel, and that, I mean, that is the one. Oh, it wrecks me every time. Isabel, Adi's daughter, is standing behind him as he's watching the ship
Shift come.
approach. I mean, she looks so elegant, and it's just such a wonderful moment.
Yeah.
I have to shout out our composers, Rachel Portman and John Ehrlich, are I mean, I'm so in love with the music they compose. And that moment, if you watch the moment where Adi is racing to the telegram and he bumps into Georgia and her family, there's just this little, like the smallest little flourish on the music. Like you
Oh,
feel the sort of impact of him and I mean, it's yeah, the
so
level of
beautiful.
detail. And yes, I agree. The music was amazing. I love
Music was
the
so good. I'm sorry, I started reading the comment, but this is something that I think I asked you when I interviewed you a while ago, which was this thing about, like the very graphic nature of some Holocaust movies and how you really, I think it felt very deliberate in what you were showing and what you were not showing. You were never showing us too much. And
Yeah.
it still all felt very horrible. So like, if you could talk about
Yeah.
that.
I mean, this is, I think, both specific to this project, but and also I think my feelings about how we realize violence on screen. I have pretty strong feelings about gratuitous violence. I think we've become very numb to it. And I think the big thing I felt with this project is I didn't want anyone to feel numb to anything. I mean, I just wanted everything to feel that you needed to look and feel everything in this series. And I actually think that I think the way I mean, first of all, the way we approached violence in this series was a very truthful approach to it, which was, if we were so directly in the family's experience that we see. I mean, if you watch the series, we see what the family sees and we experience what the family experiences. And I think the way in which sometimes, I mean, look, everyone makes their own choices as an artist, but some people really like to have a camera linger on violence. And Tommy and Georgia and I talked about this a lot. It's that's not really people's relationship to violence, particularly if they have no power in the moment themselves to do anything. It's you don't stop and stare at it. You have to move quickly
Yeah,
by it.
keep
You can't
moving.
do
Yeah.
anything and so I think we felt very strongly that, I mean, first of all, sometimes it's more horrifying not to see it.
Yeah.
And also we wanted to be really honest about what the family was experiencing and not gratuitous. And also and we did actually, there were a lot of interesting discussions with the writers in the room who also had really strong feelings about it, that did not want to see a lot of nameless victims. And I think we wanted to show people in life, not in death as much. And so we did make some conscious choices about that. But you'll see in the series, and then there are moments that like you have a responsibility to show the violence that happened to people and to be honest about it. And when that happened to family members, we showed it.
Oh my gosh, there's so many great questions coming in right now. Thank you all so much. Let me
Yeah.
try. Did the Kurtz, did the Kurtz family, did they get their own screening? Did they
Well, it was actually such a special moment. So the Holocaust Museum in DC invited us to do a screening there and invited the Kurtz family. And part of that was they asked the Kurtz family if they would like to donate material from the family to be part of the permanent collection there. So I think it was 28 of Georgia's family members from all around the world came to DC, and there was a really moving dedication ceremony where we got to see all of the pieces that, I mean, things you see in the series, the real false IDs of Helena and Adam, and sort of something Genick wrote when he was discharged from the army. He wrote 12 pages for the military of what his experience was during that time. I mean, the incredible pieces from that time. And then we followed it with a screening, which was really, really special. And I will say I kept looking back, trying to see how they were reacting while watching it. And I have thankfully now heard from Georgia that I think they've all seen all the episodes and are really
Oh, that's great.
pleased with how their family has been realized on screen, which is always very nerve-wracking. I
That's the
feel a
most
lot of
scary part.
nervousness. Uh,
Someone
I
said
see how I was working with Joey. Amazing. Amazing. She's I mean, she's an incredible person. She's been working since we were on set. I think she was 23 while we were filming, turned 24. We were on set and she goes, it's my 20-year anniversary in this business. She's been at it for a long time, and she has, I mean, she is such a skillful leader. I mean, I think Joey really embodies some of the qualities of Helena, which is like a younger sibling who somehow really becomes the leader of her family. And that's sort of Joey as a person. Like she's a force, she's kind, she's very funny. She's got a lot of chutzpah, I would say. And she's wildly talented. I mean, and she's just such a good person, and she cared so deeply about this. I could say that about everyone in the cast.
everyone.
Like this would turn into a 5-hour love fest.
Compliment fest for everyone. Me.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Uh, uh,
so many beautiful moments. Uh, sorry.
It's
I
so
feel
funny.
like
I
I'm
love this
having such a hard
question.
time.
Me thinking of the Sound of Music in the Alps scene. I was thinking of how do I do this sequence without people thinking we
Thinking
are
about the sound. I
but
wasn't thinking about the sound, even though they were like running through the Alps and there was like a
yeah.
joyfulness there,
Yeah.
right? Like
Actually, I mean, I sort of thought, well, we'll probably get some thoughts. Well, look, great moment in that film. So wonderful to think about
yeah.
that moment. But I mean, when I read the book, I thought, oh, this is, first of all, I mean, talk about such a beautiful visual thing to get to realize on screen. But I think I knew in the series and I saw in the filming of it that, they've been through so much. And there's so much darkness, there's so much physical darkness. They're in like small apartments, they're in these darker environments, and to be able to I think finding a way to realize that sequence where we could both show how hard it was. I mean, that was a hard journey that they did walking across the Alps. But in the family accounts, I mean, I think it was clear getting to be in nature, getting the way that that can be really revitalizing and to feel. I always think of nature and I sort of think there's just a certain freedom in nature. And I think to get to see the family, to have it start with some difficulty and then see it start to feel that way for them. I hoped it would feel, I think, sort of freeing. And then the way Tommy and our director of photography, Tim Ives, filmed it was just so beautiful. And then the actors, I think, really realized that.
Yeah. And they're
Well, that's
running and they're
how long did it take them to cross? I swear I knew the answer to this question at one point, but I don't remember. I mean, it was a pretty long journey. I wish I
someone
had.
also like answered like asked like I love these like little nitty-gritty like how did they get to Brazil? Like how did they have the
I
funds to get to
know.
Brazil? And I was
I
like
know.
probably
I had some people, and I do. And by the way, we did not make that up. Helena was pregnant when she was crossing the Alps, so that was, um,
that was another level of, but she'd
yeah.
survived so much at that point that it was
Yeah.
just
Like,
um someone asked about there's a moment they say like you had someone who to make sure that the details of the observance were like there's a moment where they say like Chag Sameach instead of Good Yom Tov. Were there like any moments where you're like we need to let this be in the show because it feels so like, even if it's not accurate, or was it like
oh yeah. I mean, in terms of, we sort of did a gut check, I remember, for certain things because eh, I think what I also realized, and by the way, I've gotten some feedback from people who thought they would say Good Yontif and not Chag Sameach. And like, the truth is, I think what I realized is we could both be historically accurate, and then every family is different, as
every
we
family?
know.
It's true.
And
There were
so
families that were like very strongly Zionist at that point and had like Hebrew in their home. So
exactly.
maybe something I know, like, my grandparents' family, some of them were. So it's, yeah,
And I mean, and it's, I think what we tried is to be as historically accurate as possible and then really think about what felt right for the family. I mean, I remember we were also talking about who would be in the room when the Shabbat candles were lit or the Passover candles were lit, and that sometimes it would just be the women in the room and everyone would leave. And I think we sort of felt like we wanted people together in those moments, and that was worth it, even if maybe they wouldn't have done that. But then we wondered, would they have done that? Because there were members of that family who were deeply observant, and then those who weren't as
yeah,
observant. And so I think we constantly we referenced what our historians said, and our cultural historians and our religious historians, and then reference what Georgia's own family record said, and then just
yeah,
try to do our best. And I hopefully we sort of represent this one family and people.
yeah.
I mean, there
Someone
were definitely fights within the cast, not fights, but people were like, I don't think there would be carrots on the table. Like, I just remember there was some argument over carrots on the table, and I was like, I don't know. I think there are carrots on the table this time.
Someone mentioned the firing squad scene, which is like such a
Oh,
powerful scene, and Hadass was saying
oh,
that she like kind of
yeah, yeah.
reconnected with her family's
It,
history because that's a story of how some of her family perished actually in the Holocaust.
Oh wow. That is true. I mean, again, I think this is what was, I mean, is continues to be remarkable. But then we were doing even more research. The writer of that episode, Anya Meskin, I mean, Georgia had the family account, so Mila and Felicia had recounted that event very clearly and exactly sort of as how it's written in Georgia's book and how we realize it on screen. And then, Anya was trying to just go through, I think she was looking for historical records about, that wasn't the only I mean, that became sort of a way that they would try to, the start of mass killings. And I think Anya was looking for different records of different events, and she found the records of that event, and she found their names on a list of people who were brought back. And it was, I mean, to sort of see that in sort of cold hard writing of, those who were brought back from that horror. There was something, I mean, I will never forget it, and nor should I. I mean, it is one of those things you need to remember. And it's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, that is, I will say that is a great question. How do you protect the young actress? That was, I think that sequence was the thing I was the most scared to do. And I think both to accurately portray it, but also to have a young actress at the center of it. And all I will say is that we had a very diligent plan in place, and we use a lot of, I'm very grateful for Movie Magic, because we really filmed her pieces of it very separate from what the whole picture of it was. And so she was worked very closely with her mom, and Artemisia, this small child who's the most magical child in the world. She really had no idea what she was participating in. She was really close with Hadass. Artemisia speaks English and Hebrew, and so she and Hadass would speak Hebrew to each other. Artemisia speaks Hebrew with her mom, and they had this very close connection. And she really listened to Hadass and whatever Hadass said to her. So I think we were able to capture that moment without exposing her to what the moment was, which I just never could have done with a small child. And I also have to give credit to everybody else who was participated in that sequence, the other performers on the day. And, I think but like the actors who were portraying the Nazi soldiers, they were really kind and considerate. I mean, it's like you don't think about all this stuff until you're filming it, but sometimes the people that are playing those really horrifying parts, like if the people doing them are approaching it with like it was a safe space to film something really horrible, and that is really important when you're doing sequences like that.
That's so beautiful. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Although I think we could stay here for another hour. But I want to know, Erica, because the show is so beautiful and so touching, and you really created such an amazing world. What are you working on next? Because we want to
Uh,
see more of Erica's stuff.
I didn't expect that question. Honestly, this is not an easy experience to follow. The whole time making it, I just, I think one of the things I am proud of a lot working on this show, but one thing we talked about this all the time, like it's difficult material, but we had to find some joy in the making of it, that we actually felt like that was really important. And I had this feeling the whole time making it of, this will be one of your favorite things you ever do in your life. Like it just felt I felt so lucky to be there. Sorry to use the word luck, but it's lucky to be there every day. And so I have to be honest, I'm kind of in a period of mourning this project. It really helps to get to hear from all sorts of amazing people like you, all saying lovely things about the show and asking great questions. And um but also I'm beating around the bush, because the truth is I'm trying to write a law show slightly inspired by my family, and my mom and dad are on the Zoom. They know I'm doing it. But I'm trying to sort of do a little bit something different.
Another family related
Another family.
project, but in a different.
In a different, I mean, I think one of my favorite things about being a writer is getting to dive into different stories, and I would never try to replicate this experience because this was such a singular one. So I think trying to do something a little bit different now and I always told my mom and dad that I wasn't going to be a lawyer, but maybe someday I would write a law show about that. So we'll
Oh
see.
my gosh.
My mom is
Anything
commenting.
anything you do next, Erica, please let us all know.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to everyone whose comment I couldn't get to. I'm so grateful for everyone who shared themselves and their time and their beautiful insights with us. And yes, tomorrow, hopefully you will get a recording of this show if you want to revisit it. Um, so much gratitude to
Thank
all
you
of you who
all. I'm
listened to
sorry, I'm like
us.
reading all these because I could only read so much. This is such a pleasure for me to get to be with you all. You make a TV show and it goes off into the world, into people's living rooms, and you don't get to see their experience with it. So I can't tell you, like, this has really been so touching, and I'm just very grateful to all of you have watched and all of you who hopefully will go watch now if you're just getting it where you live.
Please go watch. And on Kveller.com, you can
Tell
find
your
a
friends.
lot of coverage and a lot of questions answered. And we talked to a lot of the cast. So that was delightful. And yeah, and more stuff coming this week too. And I'm so grateful for this show, this beautiful, very special piece of Jewish representation that I think is so important and touching. So yes, thank you, Erica. Thank you, everyone.
Good
Goodbye. Good night.
night.
Bye.
Good night. Thanks.
Thank you.